A pencil maker took one of his pencils aside from the box, and he told the pencil of his own creation, "There are 5 things that I need you to know before I put you into the world. And if you will always remember these 5 things and never forget them, you will become the pencil that I created you to become." First, the pencil maker said to the pencil, "You're going to be able to do many great things in this world, but the only way you will ever be able to do those great things is if you allow yourself to be held in someone's hand." The pencil maker then told the pencil, "Secondly, you're going to experience a painful sharpening from time to time, but you're going to need that sharpening to become a sharper and a better pencil." The pencil maker told the pencil, "Thirdly, you're going to be able to correct any mistakes that you have made with the eraser that I have equipped you with." Fourthly, the pencil maker told the pencil, "Stop trying to be a stapler and scissors or a paper clip. Always remember that you are a pencil and that you have been created with a definite purpose to draw shapes and lines and letters, to leave an indelible mark on every page that you turn. Always remember that you are a pencil." Finally, the pencil maker told the pencil, "Your exterior is fresh and shiny right now, but you need to know that with time, your wood is going to be nicked, your paint is going to be chipped, and you will grow smaller and smaller. But always remember that the best part of you is not what is on the outside, but what is on the inside." And the story goes that the pencil understood the instructions of the pencil maker, and he promised to remember them, and so he went into the box with a purpose in his heart. My Savior once said, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For whoever has, to him it will be given, and whoever will have in abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he does have will be taken away." Therefore, this morning, I want you to hear the parable of the pencil. You will be able to do many great things, but only if you allow yourself to be held in someone's hand. And that someone is God. I remember a time when God told his prophet Jeremiah to go to the home of a potter. And when Jeremiah walks into this home, he sees this potter with a wheel, and on this wheel he is spinning some clay. But the clay that the potter is using is marred. The clay that the potter is using was in a flawed state. And the potter knew that the clay that was marred and in a flawed state needed to be reformed into another vessel. And so the Bible says the potter reformed the clay as it seemed good to the potter. But while Jeremiah, the prophet, was in the home of this potter, God gave him a very important revelation that I want you to remember as well. God told Jeremiah, "Behold, like clay in the potter's hand, so you are in my hand, O house of Israel." Isaiah would say it this way, "God, you are the potter, and I am the clay." It is God who works the wheel, and through our flaws and our marred state, he reforms us as it seems good to the potter. And when you look at the picture of the potter, do you see the sovereignty of God? God's promise is he has the power and he has the ability to be able to reform what he is changing. But then the problem is that sometimes we want to view ourselves as the potter and God as the clay. And we want to reform God into the state that we desire him to be in. I believe that one of my favorite songs that we sing is the song, "Let Him Have His Way with Thee." And how does it go? Let Him have His way with thee. He is the potter and I am the clay. And yes, we are marred. And yes, we are in a flawed state. We need to be reformed and we need to be renewed. And He needs to transform us into a new object through His dear Son, Jesus Christ. But in order for Him to be able to do that, we have to let Him have His way with us. You will experience a painful sharpening from time to time. But it's important to remember that you need that sharpening to become a better and a sharper pencil. You ever used a pencil where the end of the pencil is dull? Well, what do? Well, you take that pencil that you're using and you put it in an object just like this, a sharpener, and it sharpens that pencil to exactly what you need it to become. A pencil that on the end has the lead sticking out so that you can write what you need to write. Well, when we allow ourselves to be held in someone's hand, that is God's hand, we're going to be shaped by the experiences that we have in this life. Those experiences act as the sharpener. And even though it's going to leave a mark on our heart, just like this sharpener left a mark on this pencil, we will always remember that the mark that has been left on our heart was because we went through that experience and we remained faithful to God. But we relied upon the one whose hands held us. Archaeologists have discovered what they call the Alexamenos graffito. It dates back to about 200 A.D. They found it in what they believe to be an ancient school. Now, the Alexamenos graffito is simply a picture that was drawn. And if you look at this picture, you will see first a person that is hanging on a cross. And the person that is hanging on the cross has on his head a donkey head. And then there's a person at the foot of that cross who has his hands raised, and he is worshiping the person who is hanging on the cross with a donkey head. And underneath the picture that was drawn in ancient times are these words: Alexamenos worships his God. Alexamenos is faithful to his God. So apparently in this ancient school there was a student by the name of Alexamenos, and his fellow students, his friends, were making fun of him for being a Christian and for worshiping his God faithfully. You see, persecution is not some new evil. Persecution is something that has been a reality in the life of a New Testament Christian. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the Apostle Paul uses four separate phrases, and each one of these phrases have two contrasting principles. And the two contrasting principles in these four phrases, the first one is what you would call the earthiness of our vessel, but the second one is what you would call the excellency of his power that is within us. Paul says we are hard pressed on every side. That's the earthiness of our vessel. But we are not crushed. That's the excellency of the power that works within us. In fact, the word pressured or hard pressed means to be pressed down and pressed down and pressed down. And the idea is the pressures of life may squeeze us, but it will never destroy us. Why? Because we have God to look to by faith. Paul says we are perplexed. That's the earthiness of our vessel. But we are not in despair. That's the excellency of his power that is within us. In other words, we are never driven to despair because our life does not depend upon our knowledge of the big picture. In fact, when we are at our wits' end in this life, God is just beginning his best work. All things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Paul says, we are persecuted. That's the earthiness of our vessel, but we're never forsaken. You realize that the door of opportunity swings on the hinge of opposition. We're never deserted and we are never broken. Why? Because the promises of the book of God are greater than the persecutions and the pains of this life. He says we are struck down. That's the earthiness of our vessel. But we are not destroyed. That's the excellency of his power that is within us. And the idea is don't let a predator steal your joy with fear, because prayer leads to perseverance. Every pencil has to be sharpened from time to time. But the sharpening is only temporary. And ultimately, the sharpening of a pencil makes that pencil a better and a sharper tool. Anytime that you're going through crisis in your life, I want you to remember this: that where my crisis is, that's where Christ is. you will be able to correct any mistakes that you might make. You know, have you ever thought about an eraser on the tip of a pencil? An eraser is an amazing thing. It doesn't matter what I write. It doesn't matter with what motive I write it. It doesn't matter how I write it. It doesn't even matter why I write it. If I write it and I want to erase it, I simply take the eraser at the end of that pencil, I put it on the paper, and it erases any mistake that I have made on that paper. There was a little boy who had a custom that when he would pray at the foot of his bed, he would always look up at the words that were written above his bed on his wall, and those words said, "Let God." And so one day he was at school and he was being made fun of and he was being ridiculed and insulted and he was a little bit upset, he was a little bit angry. He came into his room and he slammed the door behind him and he paced back and forth in his room trying to figure out what he needed to do. It crossed his mind to pray in this moment of despair, but then he thought, I really am not in the mood, nor am I in the mindset to pray. And so he stormed out of his room and he slammed the door behind him again. But this time, one of the letters on the wall fell off. Later that night, he came back into his room, and as was his custom, he knelt down before his bed. He lifted up his eyes in prayer, and he prayed his heart out. Tears were rolling down his cheek. And after he said his prayer, as he always did, he looked up at the words that were above his bed that read, "Let God." But this time, because one of the letters had fallen off, it no longer read, "Let God." Now it said, "Let go." Forgiveness is hard. You know this. When you write out the word forgiveness on a sheet of paper with a pencil, there's a word inside of the word, and that word is given. I must give the gift of forgiveness to others. Forgiveness is a gift that I have given myself, but most of all, forgiveness is a gift that God has given me. And if I really want to feel forgiveness, if I want to be forgiven, if I want to forgive in my life, then I must let go and forgive those who have hurt me, but then I must let God take care of my mistakes with His eraser. You know, I can lay this pencil down on this pulpit right here, and I can leave it for 1,000,000 years. And you know what that pencil's never going to do? That pencil is never going to correct a single mistake. Why? Well, because it has to have the help of the hand of the one who uses it. And for 1,000,000 years, you and I could try to correct our own mistakes. We could try to find our own way to forgiveness, and we would fail. Why? Because I need the Creator's eraser to erase my mistakes. Forgiveness is the eraser on a pencil that removes the stain of my past, but unforgiveness is the permanent marker that makes the stain of my past a prison that I will never erase. The eraser erases my error, yes, but you know just as well as I do, when you take an eraser to a sheet of paper, what's it going to leave behind? It's going to leave behind a little bit of the eraser, and so you got to clear the page so that you can start off on a blank slate. If you seek God's forgiveness, God is going to forgive you, but you've got to clear off your plate so that you can begin anew. Don't ever try to be a stapler, scissors, a paper clip, or a ruler. Always remember that you are a pencil and that you have been created with a definite purpose. To draw a line forming shapes and letters and words that leave a definite message. Have you ever tried to use a pencil as a hammer? Doesn't work, does it? What if you were to try to take a pencil and use it as a screwdriver? Would it work? You and I are fearfully and wonderfully made by the Creator of the universe. We are His own special creation, made in His image. But when we try to do things that we were not created to do, when we try to do things that we were not made for, what happens? We become useless. What's the purpose of a knife? Well, you would be able to answer that question pretty quickly. To cut things. But if every man is being honest in this auditorium right now at this moment of time, and I just saw a bunch of men's heads peek up, There has come a time when you've been in the kitchen or somewhere in your house and you've seen a screw loose, and the drawer to the knives was closer than the drawer to the screwdrivers, and what did you do? You went and you grabbed yourself a butter knife, and you took that butter knife and you tried to screw that screw in with the butter knife. And what happens to the tip of that knife? It bends. What happens when we try to use a knife as a screwdriver? It's going to damage it. Now you ask yourself this question: why do so many people live damaged lives in this world? Why are so many people hurt? It's because they try to live their life in contradiction to God's purpose for them. When I live my life in contradiction to God's purpose, it's going to have spiritual consequences. My heart's going to be hardened. My life is going to be separated from God. I'm only ever going to find spiritual disconnect and spiritual emptiness, and it's only ever going to have negative eternal consequences in my life. I'm going to have emotional consequences too. I will seek hope and I will find hopelessness. I will seek direction and I will find depression. I will seek peace, but I will only ever find unease. And it's going to have moral consequences. Instead of commitment, I will choose compromise. Instead of selflessness in the image of my Savior, I'm going to choose selfishness in the image of the God of this world. My soul is going to be susceptible to harmful influences, and the consequences will only grow. I'm a pencil. I'm not a stapler, a paperclip, scissors, or a ruler. I'm a pencil. And I've been created to fulfill a definite purpose, to leave an indelible message behind on every single sheet of paper that I write. I must make my mark and continue to fulfill the purpose for which I have been created. And brethren, we need to stop stapling the paper and start drawing shapes and letters and words on a masterpiece for His glory and fulfill our purpose. Your exterior is fresh and shiny now, and you're beautiful. But with time, your paint will chip, your wood will get nicked, and you'll grow old. But you must always remember that the best part of you is what is on the inside. Do you realize that I can break a pencil, but then I can put that pencil in a sharpener, and if I put that broken pencil in a sharpener, is that pencil going to be able to fulfill its purpose once again? I can break a pencil. Life might break you. But you must remember that what's important when it comes to you is not what's on the outside. What's important is not what's on the exterior. What's important is on the interior. It's your soul. Have you ever tried to use a pencil that doesn't have graphite on the inside? How'd that work? It didn't work. Because the most important part of a pencil is not the eraser, and the most important part of the pencil is not the exterior, the color, the metal that surrounds the eraser. The most important part of the pencil is what? Is what is on the inside. And this body is just a vehicle to get me from earth to eternity. A little brown cork fell in the path of a whale, who lashed it down with its angry tail. But despite the blows, it quickly arose and it floated serenely before the whale's nose. The cork said to the whale, "You may flap and you may sputter and you may frown, but you will never, never keep me down, for I am made of the stuff that is buoyant enough to float instead of drown." It's about what is on the inside. Lazarus was miserable on this earth, but he made it to heaven. Job was blessed beyond measure, but he suffered more than most. Jesus Christ was the Son of God, but if you listen to Isaiah, He was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Joy is the seal that surrounds the earthen vessel that contains salvation. And this life is going to ding us, yes. And this life is going to knock us down, yes. And this life is going to undercut us, yes. And this life is going to go all 12 rounds with us. But when Paul says that our treasure is contained in earthen vessels, that's a powerful image, because earthen vessels are easily broken, just like this pencil. And earthen vessels are easily frayed, just like this pencil. And earthen vessels are easily cut and slashed, just like this vessel. But what matters is what's on the inside of the pencil. What matters in us is what is on the inside, the treasure that we have. Our outward man, Paul says, is wasting away day by day, but the inward man is what? It's being renewed day by day. Michelangelo, the famous sculptor, once said, "The more the marble wastes, the more the statue grows." Hear the parable of the pencil. You and I have been created with potential, and we've been created with purpose. If we will embrace His workmanship and His guidance and allow ourselves to be held within His hand, if we will learn from our mistakes, if we will value what is on the inside, if we will strive to make our mark on every single page that we turn, we will always fulfill our purpose and our potential in this life, and we will leave an indelible mark, not only in the lives of others, but in this world. Be the pencil that is held in God's hands, because then you can leave a lasting impact on the world. That is the parable of the pencil.